Okay, so for part three of this recording is just going to continue with the same type of exercise. And what we're going to do in part three is we're going to create information and disaggregate data that will help us understand the racial grouping of our student population that we have in this set of 20. So I'm going to begin again by beginning with a group that we have. And if you wanted to sort your data so that you can group the number of black students and then the number of white students, etc. So you can do it in any order that you want to do it. And so there is no set way that you do it. You just have to be consistent on doing it. So I'm going to follow a pattern that we have used typically in looking at data, and so we're going to just start with one of the racial groups. So we'll start by identifying, and we're going to do this for each. So I'm going to start with the number of white students that are here. And I'm just going to create the word white space and then add the percent that's there. Okay, and then I'm going to designate here with the identifier that we use, which was a W there. Okay, so I'm going to identify that. I'm going to go ahead and notice that it's already picking up for me the fact that I wanted a border and the color of the border and all of that. So that's really good. But you just go ahead and get that done. All right, so now what we're going to do is follow the same type of process that we've been using. And so we just have to make sure that when we grab data, we're only picking data related to those white students. So this is where, for each racial group. So this is where I think it might be important to have you do a different sort to help you kind of count. You could actually go down and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we know we have 13 students, okay? And that's fine to do it that way. You certainly don't have to do it any other way. But sometimes I like to highlight the information. Remember, when we switch data around, we have to always grab all the data associated with it. We're going to just go to that section because what we're looking for is not going to impact the bottom half. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to do sort, custom sort. And instead of male-female grouping, I want to sort by racial grouping. And so now what I see, it has actually put all those different racial groupings, and it just makes it easier to count. I can go, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 white students. I have 2 Hispanics and 2, 3, 4, 5 black students. So if you know you have 20 students total, you have 7 that are not white, then, just do the quick calculations, anything that's going to help you do that. Now, I'm going to put this back at this point just because, actually, I'm going to keep it like this in order to do the calculation so that you can see how easy it is to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my sum, since I'm looking for a sum here. For this, I'm going to put my cursor here in this area, in this blank. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do auto sum. Click on sum. Again, you see that that's already pulled up in there, and that's not what I want, right? I don't want any of that. So I'm going to change this now. For the white students, I'm going to pick for row 10 through row 22. So E10 colon E22. make sure I don't have anything else included there, right? I'm going to step outside that parentheses, put a /. I'm going to put the total number of white students. We said we're 13, asterisk, and the number 100, and hit enter. All right, so there I have that bit of information that's right there. Okay, so now what I can do is that is for item 1. So I'm going to follow along here. I'm going to pull across, and that's going to be my data. I'm going to choose the drop-down menu, ignore, so that I don't have that up there anymore. All right, and that's all it is to it, and I can keep this grouping while I do the other. So I want you to take a few moments and to do each of them. So what we might do next will be the number of Black students and percentage. Give the designation that we have in our column again, and we want this to be uniform in terms of, so again, here in my sum column, I click auto sum. I don't want all of that information, so I'm just going to change it here. So now what I'm looking at is row 3 through row 7. Row 3 through row 7. Put my asterisk on the outside, /. The total number of Black students that we said we had were 5. Asterisk 100. And so now I have 40% there for item 1. I'm going to drag it over to apply that formula. I'm going to get rid of that little error message because it's not necessary. Then I'm going to do the same thing for my Hispanic percentage and set that up the exact same way that I did before. This time I'm going to choose sum, but now I'm only going to look at those rows with the H, so that's row 8 and 9. So starts with row 8, colon, capital E, going to row 9, outside, /. We know we only have 2 students, asterisk, 100, enter. And so I have 50% of my students. And that gives me a little quick check. That means one student answered it correctly and the other one didn't. So I'm going to pull across, have my data, ignore that little error message because it's not doesn't have any kind of concern. And so again, so we have our formula that's calculated all the way across. And so that's how you can pull out and disaggregate the information based on racial groupings that you have. Now, we would want to do our centering of information the same way we did before. So I just like to make sure I grab everything that I need. So I just highlight any type that I know it needs to be centered. And there you go. It's all nice and centered. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to disaggregate data by their ability grouping. So we're going to start with gifted, and we're going to follow the exact same process that we did before. We know that that's designated with the G. So in order to help me do that, as I go ahead and make my colors and borders here, I can now disaggregate or group my information by clicking on the row header, hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to grab all the data that's associated with each of those students. And now I'm going to do a sort, custom sort, And instead of by racial grouping, I want to group by ability grouping. And I'm doing this just to help me do a quick formula fill in order to get these percentages. So what I see here is I have 3 students that are gifted, right? So in this sum column, I am going to use auto sum. I don't want all of those. I only want rows 5 through row 7. So E5 through E7. Outside the parentheses, / the number of gifted students, I only have 3, asterisk 100, and I'm going to click enter. And so 0 students of my gifted group answered question 1 correctly, right? So I'm going to drag across to fill in all the way across. I'm going to ignore the error that's there because it's really not impeding anything. But notice what I have here. I have these little hashtag marks. So in order, that just means that the number is not displaying properly. There's not enough space for it. So I just come up here to the, in between the W and the Z, double click, and oh my goodness, look at that. I have now unleashed a very long, and if I did that for each one, then that would really be a problem, right? It means that number's going on and on and on. So I tell you what I'm going to do at this point. I'm going to bring this back in because I'm going to show you how you can eventually take care of all of that information. All right, so I'm going to maybe take this one out just a little bit to see if I can get, there we go. I have 100 that's noted there, and so at least I can see that. All right, now don't be concerned that we're not seeing those decimal points yet. We'll deal with that in a little bit later. So now I can see my data cleanly for gifted students, and so what I'm going to do is the same thing, very same process for ELL students. So I'm going to create my header, oops, and it's very important that you get your cursor in the right cell. If you make a mistake, Control-Z will take care of it. And I'm going to put my designation just like it is in the chart. I'm going to highlight, put my borders around it. I'm going to calculate now, auto sum. And now I'm going to look only at rows 3 and 4. 3 colon E4. Make sure I take off anything that's not pertinent to it. So it's highlighting just that information. / I only have 2 ELL students. So 2 asterisk 100 and enter. And now I have that designation. I grab, I pull, I get rid of the error message, and I have that column done. And now the only one left to do is the IEP percent. And I identify its marker. Put my cursor here, again, auto sum. And this time I'm dealing with rows 8 and 9. So E8 colon E9. There are only 2 students, correct, with IEPs. So / 2 students, asterisk 100, and enter. And now I'm going to grab and pull and get rid of the error message. And so what I've done now is taken care of creating as part of my data and calculating the percentage of each of not just females and males, but also my racial groupings that are represented in the class, and the ability groupings that are represented in the class. All right. So now that I have this information here, I want to make sure that I have all of my data centered. So again, I just kind of pick there and I center it. So now we're all, maybe sometimes you have to do it twice to make sure it's all nice and centered. But the problem is I picked up this left column and I don't want those headings to be centered. So I go back, highlight just that, and put them to a left justified in the cell. All right, so now that I have my data all fixed there, then what I'm going to do next is calculate the class sum. Before I do that, I'm just going to go ahead and designate some colors. So remember, 1 through 10 had to do with one grouping of questions, so I'm going to make sure I highlight that information, 1 through 10, and I'm going to choose that border color that matches the top that I selected. I'm going to choose through 16 to match the red color, that grouping of questions, and then the final 4 questions will be representative of those above as well. But now what you see here is I still need some borders. So I'm going to choose borders, all borders, and now I don't want the border color to be white. I want the border color to be black. So I'm going to choose the line color as black, and again I can just highlight and choose black, and it should take care of that. Okay, let me do that again. I'm going to choose my line color and go right across to each one, not holding down anything, just to get it all taken care of. And actually, I still think that's a little bit of a chore. So I'm going to highlight, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose format cells. I'm going to use border. I'm going to use the color that's here automatically. Let's see if we can get this here without font fill. Okay, we'll do this a little bit more. This seems a little bit tedious here to have to type, to have to click into every single cell. So I'll work on that at the end. There we go. And that took care of it. So you just may have to play around with it. Sometimes they have a little bit of quirky nature, but there we have our information. And so good. We know that that we've got our data points there for each. And so now